Okay, so this is the Nerd Summit Lego and Learning Panel Discussion. I'm Joe Bacal. I'm a software engineer at a place called Concord Consortium in Concord, Mass. And I used to be a teacher. I taught fourth grade for many years. I taught technology. And I even had a stint as a school counselor. And I've taught Adina's children. So that's my claim to fame. And I'm a lifelong Lego person. I had the space Legos in an authentic fashion as a child in the 80s. And then they became cool, and I feel extra proud about that.
Did you have broken helmets?
Yep. I mean, I literally had the space Lego movie.
Yep.
The space, you know what I'm trying to say. I have that exact thing, yeah. Okay, so that's me. I think I'll let you guys introduce yourselves because you'll do a better job than me. Scott.
Okay. Well, I kind of introduced myself, so I think everybody here was in that one. So
Right.
Okay, then let's move on.
Okay.
All right. I'm Jack Demkowski. I'm a 6th through 8th grade technology engineering teacher in Northampton. I teach robotics and design engineering. As far as like my Lego experience goes, I had Legos as a kid back in the 90s. You know, I think space helmets, is that those little ones with the visors that pop up? Is that what you're talking about? Yeah, we had some of those. And like we would, as far as Legos goes, we used them at college actually more so. Was more my experience with them doing Mindstorm stuff and competitions at the collegiate level and things like that. So I have some kids at school that also going through, building robots and stuff and mechanisms and design problems. So
Which we'll talk about.
yeah.
All right. And Adina.
Hi everybody, my name is Adina. I am a math teaching faculty here at UMass. I am sort of tech adjacent. Tech is not my primary focus. And my research here is educational research, and I research barriers to STEM completion, which in part because I work with freshmen, I'm also very interested in what's happening in K-12. I have 3 kids myself who are 15, 12, and 7. And I'm particularly interested in working with groups who are underrepresented in STEM, so typically women, minorities, LGBTQIA+ students, and how we can sort of inspire them and get them into STEM. And for me, my journey into Lego happened when my now 15-year-old was 5. I wrote a grant as elementary school to bring in a Lego First robotics program that would be in the classroom, and then I coached teams there, sort of going around to classrooms and finding sort of people from underrepresented groups being like, hey, you should join the robotics team. Hey, trying to trick kids into doing math without realizing how much math they were actually doing. And so I've been coaching now for many a years. And my high schooler who's 15, he did his last year. And I'm currently coaching. We just finished our season. The Robots is the name of our team. This is our team. So that's sort of how I got invested in Lego. It's sort of a pathway to build up kids and get them inspired in STEM outside of the traditional classroom experiences.
You can't do first without t-shirts.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
You have to.
That's awesome. So that's great. I feel like that kind of takes care of what my first question was, is what's your personal Lego history? So is there anything else that any of you would want to add to your stories of your personal Lego history? That's anything personal about the Legos for you?
Mine's really gotten out of hand.
Okay.
Yeah.
How so?
The amount of money I spend.
Gotcha. Okay.
Luckily, I make enough to kind of cover that, but not a lot extra.
Okay, that's good. That's what I'm going for in life. Now
There you
I'll
go.
have to talk to you because I'm interested in having the same problem someday. Okay, so my first question is, what differentiates the experiences of using virtual and physical building environments? This is a tech conference, and everyone's into virtual everything. So, what's the difference? Any one of you want to take it first?
I can jump in. For me, I've sort of worked in both environments through Lego, but there's something about the tactile experience of like trial and error. I find it's a lot easier to like stick some Legos together, pull them apart, see what's going on. There's like a little Lego here, right? So you can sort of envision exactly how you want it to be in real time. I think they both have value, but there's something to having the pieces, envisioning them, thinking about them, thinking how they're constructed together, and the beauty of the mathematics of seeing like the Lego dots and counting them and using them in various
Studs.
ways. I think there's neural connections that happen when you do things tactilely, when you physically touch things, that I think are important when working with these types of tools.
I'd say the same thing. Exactly. The nice thing about virtual is none of us have all the bricks we need. And so even when I'm building big, I would test things out, built them in the virtual environment, and then I didn't care about what color I was using, or I just needed to make sure that the assembly would work. So that's what I kind of tell kids is, build first, build your mock, and then start to go digital so that you can expand it, and then there are ways you can purchase those bricks, if you're happy with what you did.
I think it was hard. I tried to teach middle school students in the virtual environment, and they just couldn't hold anything. So that was really hard to have them try to conceptualize what they're making. So if it was even attaching, gears and wheels to something, they actually want to see it spin. That's like the excitement, seeing an end product of something they made and then coded and then it moves by itself. It's like, they can make it move through the virtual environment, but when we finally came back to school, it's great to see them actually put their hands on stuff, and that's what they want to do. And it's fun playtime for sure. Yeah, and you're tricking them into learning or to do something, which is not tricking them, but they just have way more fun doing it for sure. There's more engagement.
Yeah. It's interesting. So I noticed the same thing, and even for myself, like I always played with Legos as a kid in person, and then when I got into teaching tech, I was super into code world, and like doing everything. Like I kind of like the constraint of being in the box, and I really was like I had read how much hands-on, like it's got to be hands-on. Like I really did learn, like wow, like using your hands, it is so much more engaging for kids. Adina, do you know, and I also have a loose general idea that there's research out there that says, yes, science says this is true, something about your neurons. Like, do you know more about that? Is there
So in the math world, it's the resources that I've researched are more math-based, so think about like Montessori-based tactile, but manipulating things through trial and error and having a tactile experience fires different neurons than in a virtual experience. Yeah. And so, they say things that like wire together, fire together. So like when you're playing with Legos and you're experimenting, there's immediate feedback of trial and error. Like, does it look like I want it to look like? And you can make those adjustments virtually, but it doesn't have quite the same impact as the tactile learning.
Yeah. That's fascinating. Okay. All right. So, is there anything with the physical? I mean, I found with using the Lego, like I discovered the old one that's like 10 years old or 15, 20 years old now. There's a Lego environment that was the only one that I could get to work. And I actually found a couple kids a very small fraction of them, I preferred it. And they could handle sort of they had the patience to be manipulating this 3D world. I don't like it as much, but it was interesting to me to notice that a few kids would ask to do it, where most wanted to do real Legos. Okay, so what can working with Lego teach us about learning in general? And as a sidecar, if you want to say life in general, you can. But what, particularly as educators, is there anything that you've learned about learning that you can connect with working with Legos?
Just experiment, build, I think harnessing that creative thought, like when you give a design problem and asking them to build something of their own design, that's really hard for 6th, 7th, 8th grade students, right? Okay. For younger kids. They're used to seeing a picture of something and maybe trying to copy it or making it look like that. I intentionally make things very vague, right? And we'll ask them to build something but not show pictures of an end product to see what they come up with, right? And it's that play through learning, and they're usually either you get something giant that's like this tall, or you get somebody who makes something really little mini tiny, and it's like still you still did that. And I think it's really important to like explore that and feel confident, because afterwards they feel more confident, like, hey, I made that, I made it work. And it does it besides just doing well in school, they are proud of themselves for building something of their own design, and that it did something that nobody else's project could do, in my experience. So,
And on educational terms, for people that are not like educators, what is a design problem as opposed to not a design problem?
Do you want me to give an example?
Yeah.
Okay. So right now, I was just saying earlier, we're doing my zombie apocalypse challenge, right? I have like 8 different tasks that they have to. There are scenarios and some mini requirements and bonus requirements, and one of them is just I call it the recon truck, right? So it has to have 2-wheel drive minimum with motors, and use at least 2 mechanisms, right? Gears or chains or something like that. And then it could be anything. It could be giant. It could be tiny. And then the bonus is to make it engage 4-wheel drive somehow. So, and again, there's no pictures. You can't research it online. You can't go into Google and put up that and try to find pictures. And then they finally make something, and it's really cool. So I guess that's like one of the design problems they come up with. So yeah,
you two will have a lot to talk about at some point after this, because you weren't at Scott's keynote just now, but I learned something about Scott just today, that he is not only a mechanical engineer, but also builds and restores and drives race cars.
Oh,
so
nice.
When you're talking about gear ratios and all kinds of inside the car stuff, I have a feeling it's turning on some lights.
So I coached first Lego League for a couple of years, and then got too busy, so I judged, so I did a lot of judging. But I tell you what, until you've tried to explain what gear lash is to a kid, because Lego is totally gear lash, right?
Yeah.
And so anyway.
Gear lash.
What?
So tell us, for example, this connects to a question that I had later. So I don't know what gear lash is. What is it about? Would you rather teach gear lash? How would you like to teach gear lash if you were going to teach gear lash? And tell us what it is, if you can, in the process.
Well, so gear lash is when you have 2 gears, the teeth cannot totally mesh together, okay? There has to be some lash. It's the tolerance between the gear teeth, right? And literally we have courses that teach. Mm-hmm. So I'd spend, a quarter or semester learning about gear design.
Gotcha.
Now, Lego builds big gaps, big gear lash. So the first robot that kids usually make has 2 motors, and it probably has some kind of gear drive. And what they get, they get upset about is that it's always going to turn, because the gears aren't fully engaged and they're different. So all of a sudden it just starts in a different way. Mm-hmm. Now there's some ways to make that better. You never totally can get away with it. But so I always, typically I would teach it. I'm saying, okay, I want you to put just enough power to get the gears to be engaged, then ramp it up, versus just, going right to the speed. So I'm not saying, it's just that it's such a esoteric.
Yeah.
It's kind of like game theory. I always talk about game theory when I coached, and you're probably wondering why my kids are weird. But because, to me, First Lego is all about game theory. What points you can go for,
how do you play the game?
Yeah, so what can get you the highest value for the least input? It's just and so I tackle these, and some kids get that, some don't, and it just kind of depends on the year and the various skills. But and then I also trying to keep it from one kid. It's got to be a team, and that's always big challenge.
Interesting. Okay, so I lost track of it, but we were talking about learning in general. Adina, is there anything else like is there any kind of, like, you are a professional educator as well as a professional mathematician, you have to help people learn stuff. Is there anything about Legos and math that you can connect?
Yeah, I mean, I think what I would add to this is there's sort of 3 points that sort of coexist with what these folks have been saying. The first is that there's a lot of trial and error within Lego, and in the robotics competition, they're trying to get points. But to sort of mitigate that, we talk a lot about the design process. Like, what do we want our robot to do? What do we want this attachment to do? Like, we first have to conceptualize, like, what are we trying to make? And then how do we build it? And within that, there's, like, a lot of negotiation in the community. So we talk about, like, how do we talk about ideas? How do we make sure we're respectful? We try to set group norms at the beginning so that everybody feels like their voice can be heard. But through this, I also always talk about productive failure. So every time something doesn't work, I'm like, well, what did we learn? Like, it didn't work, but we learned that it veered too much to the right. So now we have something that we can troubleshoot, right? And we get really excited when things work, even if they're not working the way we want them to, right? So then we go, okay, let's go back to the design process. What is it that we want the robot to do? What is it doing so far? How do we build upon this? And so, I talk a lot about how much we learn from making mistakes. And I think this is critically important in math because, in math, there's this idea that, everything, the right answer, right, which I hate so much. And so this is an environment where, like, we can have wrong answers and we can celebrate them and we can get really excited and we can build community and learn to negotiate about things that are not so critically important to the world, right? Like, we negotiate, like, how many degrees does it need to turn, right? Someone says 10, someone says 20, say, let's try 15, right? Like, it's much easier to build those sort of communication strategies while teaching the process and thinking about how we sort of leverage our failures into wins. And I think that's a really important part of using Legos is that when you bring in the creativity and the openness, it's safe to make mistakes with Legos.
Very much so.
Definitely find out what doesn't work until you can make it work. Yeah.
I was just having this thought. I just thought something while you were saying it, and something that you talked about earlier. Like, I was thinking about little kids and math. Like, okay, little kids care sometimes about quantity. What's a big number? How tall can it be? How many pizzas? But after a while, like, quantity gets a little bit boring. This is only so exciting. The numbers are either bigger than another number or not, right? And then, how do you get kids to care about some other aspects like ratio, right? And now, maybe Legos, you were talking about overlap and the gears and the turning and negotiating this relationship between some numbers. Like, it just occurs to me now, like, oh, there's these, like, kids can start to care about numbers in a less linear way, maybe, through playing with Legos and particularly maybe doing robotics, but maybe all the stuff you were talking about with building.
Well, and I think that also think about Lego is inherently math-based.
Yeah.
And the fact that all these things interact, whether they're on their side or on their top, I've seen courses just built on Lego math. I mean, it's kind of, I don't know, it's inherently math-based.
Kids always want to make their car go the fastest, right? So who can build the fastest car that's autonomously driven, and you have to figure out the gear ratio and how are you going to make it actually work? And then you start introducing torque because they'll mess up the gear ratio and then they'll plop it down and press go and it won't go. And you're like, but it's supposed to go, and it doesn't. And it's like, oh, but it's geared to go really fast. And you're like, yeah, but it's not moving yet, so it can't go really fast. So then that's a whole nother thing, but. Yeah, they just want to get down to the end of the hallway as fast as possible, which is great. And it crashes, and they have to rebuild and make it better. It's a whole trial and error thing, like you were saying.
Well, and so a lot of times, I can't tell you how many twisted axles we've done.
Yeah.
ABS plastic has
spiraled,
limitations that you can exceed easily.
Yep.
So obviously the word play comes up with Lego all the time, and play is now a good word in education. If you are in education grad school now, people are going to say, oh, play is good, the power of play. But then sometimes, like, when you're in actually a school, there might not be as much play, or you might not feel as a teacher you're allowed to do play, or all of a sudden play theory and practice. So, what is play? Can we talk about what play means in general and or specifically with Legos? And I think there's probably a lot of different kinds of play that happen with Legos. There's not just one kind of play. What are some different kind of play that you see? You can say if it's good or bad or neither. I don't care. Just tell me about different kinds of play.
I think that play right now is just a code word for creativity. I think oftentimes when we think of STEM, we don't think of creativity. That's meant for the humanities, right? Like we are STEM. And what we fail to realize is that like all the innovation that comes up in STEM, all the new things, that's all through creativity. It's all through trying things that are new and out of the box. And so when you think of Lego and you think of play, you know, it's this idea of we don't have to follow these directions. We can build whatever we want. We can use our imaginations and, you know, sort of embracing that and telling kids, like, it's okay to try it. Try stuff. See what happens, right? Touch the button. Push the button, right? Like, see what happens is so critically important for their natural curiosity. Kids are so good at math and STEM and physics. And when you give them the opportunity to try things and learn things on their own, when you say yes, like, yes, do it, try it, play, you know, they sort of get to have this happiness experience, which again, like, brings them to wanting to do it and being proud of their work and all these important things. But then later when you point out, like, oh, you were doing really important math, or, you know, you did some really great physics to figure that out,
Right.
Then that pairing of the creativity and the openness with the sort of, you know, underscore of, like, what you were really doing is physics, what you were really doing is this.
Yeah.
Like, pairs to let them see that there can be creativity in these fields. And so for me, when I hear play, that just codes for me as creativity. And we want to get as much of that as we can, because as a society, we are, like, booming, and harnessing that will be incredible.
In fact, I'd go to say that a lot of the problems that are in the engineering, even in the science world, is trying to divorce creativity. And so I often tell people that there's money in STEM, but what we're really teaching is STEAM, you know, adding in art, because really we need complete thinkers, not, you know, so focused. And, you know, I am now calling myself an artist. I think I am with what I do, but I never would have said that when I was in college. In fact, I would say I wasn't creative.
I think there's different types of play. There's like the kid who sits in the back and starts making all these little things, and you're like, hey, like, let's make sure that we're working on what we need to be working on. Well, yeah, Mr. D, check out this thing. It's like gonna do this, it's gonna do that. It's like, okay, like, cool. But then there's the play, then it's like, how do we build that into what we're doing, right? Like, let's hone it in a little bit, you know, and that's just classroom management and making sure that, you know, I mean, I'm glad you're super into it and all that stuff, and I want you to explore that, but like, how can we take what you're doing and add elements of the lesson for the week, you know, like, that's great, you know. They usually end up doing it, you know, like some kid made a helicopter last week that, you know, the rotor and everything spun, and it had a little searchlight that spun at the same time, and it had a drop box that came down to pick up survivors. Like, it was pretty cool. And it's like, wow, you did that in a really short amount of time. Like, that's awesome. And kids are like, it also, like, makes the rest of the class excited too, because they see it and go, oh, you can make something like this, you know, because there's always that misconception too of, like, I don't know what to do, or I don't know how to do it. So there's a roadblock that sometimes comes up, but then, you know, they just start to watch each other, and then they're like, they gain more confidence and just start to explore and make stuff, which is like the purpose of it, you know, is to have fun and explore and be confident in yourself. Like, you're trying to build the confidence in yourself to try something that you've never done before, and, like, make it happen. And it's okay to fail and do again, or it didn't turn out the way you wanted it to, and make it better. Ask your friends for help. They're your friends, you know. And during the pandemic, we lost a lot of that. So we've only been back for 2 years, and this is going to be something they struggle with their entire life, for sure.
When I, as a teacher, sometimes I would have, like, imaginary conversation in my mind. So now I get to ask some real engineers and mathematicians the thing I've always wanted to ask them. And so it's like this. I'm looking around at my tech classroom, and there are kids zooming cars across the floor. Two other kids are in the corner, and they're like playing. We've got Lego Technic out, but what they're doing is collecting a whole bunch of pins and mass-producing toothbrushes, beams, and pins, just toothbrushes. So no gear lash, nothing that would look like engineering. But they are playing. And so in my mind, I'm having this conversation with this imaginary critic, and I'm defending what's happening in my room that may look like chaos. And I'm saying something like, well, those kids are learning patterns. They're learning that you can have an algorithm to make a toothbrush, and it's assigned 3 pegs to these 3 locations on these things, and you'll have the same thing over and over again. Or these kids are, like you said, Adina, they're learning physics as they zoom their car across the floor over and over and over again for half an hour. So, but on the other hand, I also heard what you were saying, Jack, that like, well, but we're not studying that. Like, we're studying gear lash or whatever the official engineering concept is, or gear ratios, or pulleys, or this simple machine, or that machine. We want you to learn that. So, can you, as mathematicians or engineers, like, can you vouch? Should I let those kids keep playing with the car, or should I, like? Can we come to the precipice of play, and is there a spot where we have to redirect the play? Is there a rule for that? Or am I just being overly binary about it, and the answer is, yeah, let them play a little and then just get back to work?
I don't want to speak too much on K-12 education because I think Jack probably has a lot more experience, but I think there are pressures that come down through things like Common Core where students do have to know standards, right? And so I think as a society, we don't have enough time in classrooms to let kids explore. Like, we don't have that sort of built-in time. So, it would be great to be able to do both, right? In the best of both worlds. Like, start with a lesson and then, also let kids explore and play. And the kid who's building the toothbrush is definitely learning something different that's important.
Yep.
But it may not be the thing that you have to teach, and that dichotomy is so difficult for teachers. I teach at college, so I have a lot more freedom to do what I want. And then, I coach kids after school, so I don't struggle with this in the classroom as much. But I think both are valuable educationally, but there's also things as professionals that you have to, make sure the kids hit the standards on. So.
Yeah, you're talking about the definition of differentiated instruction.
Right.
Like there are some kids who they just need a different, like the scaffolded tasks that, as a teacher, I'm totally engaged in the content, right? Like the content is what we want to try to push ahead, but it's almost become secondary after all the other things we have to do. Whether it's learning about the students themselves and relationships that make them even feel comfortable in the classroom, or have them feel comfortable in the classroom. Especially my room, right, is like a wood shop / very messy, like totally discombobulated space that if you were to walk in, it is chaos. Like there are kids do not sit, it's standing, there's things everywhere, and so if you were 12 years old and you walk into a space like that, you might be a little overwhelmed, and you might just want to like play and do something. And had to reel them in and say, hey, like, it's okay, like, what are you going to do? Or how can we make what you're making part of what everybody else is doing? Right. Or do you have a friend, or somebody that you're comfortable working with? Like, again, like I was saying earlier, it forms relationships, I think, which is key for them, especially as middle school students. At the high school, when I taught high school, and you guys were talking about the competitions and like figuring things out, that's when you start honing in that smaller core group that can the play becomes very competitive, and they love being competitive.
Yes.
So,
I've actually used this tower building with high school students, and they were much more, they fit my model much better.
Interesting.
To say that, but I guess because adults actually know something, and high schoolers are still developing all this. But what I loved is, when I did the first part where I just tell them build a tower, we're joking, we're laughing, we're playing, we're doing other stuff. People are working together apart. I mean, just it is chaos. And then I stop it at 10 minutes, and then I score them, and then I explain and do the training. And the second round, a pin could drop.
Interesting.
Because they just become the most focused individuals.
Yeah.
And then they always beg to do it again because they've improved, but they think, ooh, I think I could even do better.
So they saw the connection between some stuff they were learning while they were playing and some actual stuff that could be quantified and like crystallized and applied as quote knowledge.
Right.
So that's a good one. I'm thinking, yet I don't want to, like, I think that's one of my, with Lego, with First, sometimes that gets under my skin a little bit, the competitive aspect of it. Sometimes that freaks me out, but I find what you say to be maybe helpful. That maybe is good motivation sometimes.
Well, and the nice thing, and we tend to focus on the technical side at first, but the gracious professionalism is an awesome component, and the component of the project. I had a team that actually won the state for the project, and they did okay on the board, and they were just as happy as the team that won the technical. And that's what I really like about First is that they're really trying to broaden the scope so it isn't just looked at as just the technical, that there's a communication. So it was really fun to bring in people that help them understand communication and presenting, so I could bring in people that were much better than I was at that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Interesting. So we have time for a couple of questions, but I have one last question, which is, so like Legos, like I noticed you brought out for us to play with, just for the most part, with a few exceptions, one tall bricks, just really the most rudimentary bricks.
Yep.
And those of some people are obviously aware there's this like amazing universe of Lego pieces. Do you guys have any like particular series or forms of Legos that you want to like put out there for anyone that doesn't know about them, or put in a plug for any particular Lego series or type of Lego?
I like all the Star Wars stuff. 'Cause I'm a
Okay,
Star
there we
Wars
go.
nerd. I've always wanted to build a Millennium Falcon, but don't have the time.
All right.
Can't wait for my son to like want to do it too, so I have an excuse.
Yes, exactly.
I don't. I would be remiss to say that one of the sort of barriers and downsides to Lego is the cost, and so I'm
Yes.
a little uncomfortable endorsing anything because they
Yes.
are so expensive, and entry and participation
Good.
into Lego has a financial cost associated
Yes.
with it. So there's no one that I would
Okay,
say,
good.
but-
Because that actually relates to the question before this that I didn't get to, which is what obstacles, real or imagined, exist between students and schools or
Can
their
I-
houses and Lego? Yeah, go ahead.
So I get that question a lot. And one of the things that, like when I do this activity and I get enough funding to give prizes, my prizes are all Creator 3-in-1s. And when I give it to the winner, I say, I want to see your fourth build. So when parents ask me that, I say, yes, you need to get them the series kits. But if you want them to use Lego to increase their ability, the Creator sets, and then just challenge them, I want you to build all 3, then build a 4th. And I've gotten a lot of good feedback because the Creator series tend to actually be pretty good value.
Yeah.
For brick count and the
Yep.
number of bricks and their ability to make various things, and so I still buy a lot of Creator sets, and that's what I give for all my prizes.
I think one of the advantages of the 3-in-1s though is that you always get leftover pieces, right? You build a big set, you're gonna have 30 tiny little pieces left over.
They'll all be one by ones.
With the 3-in-1s, you're not using every piece in each
Yep.
build, so there's always leftover pieces that you can add something on to. So even if you follow the instructions, you have 50 pieces maybe that you can add a little side thing to, which I think it helps with creativity.
and it's scalable. Like you can get smaller kits. So I was, when I do a competition and I have a little bit of funding, I can give 5D, to the top 5, and I can do that 6 times in a day. And so I can impact a lot of kids. And so I that's why I kind of like it. It is more scalable.
Get a lot of Legos donated to me from parents or people in the community, and they bring in any tote that's just like full of anything, or the pull-out drawers, and then you just watch kids start to put stuff together, and they make these crazy universal joints with things moving, and you're like, whoa! And then they see stuff they've never seen before, and they just start building. But when it starts getting low, you're like, oh man, like we're starting to run out, and I never thought we would.
I think that question might have been also a secret, unconscious wish for me to be able to say that I want to say that Technic is good for all ages. And one thing I used to do was to put out a very limited set of Technic pieces for kindergartners up through 6th grade. Pins and beams, yellow pins that are swingy and black pins that are not so swingy, and some beams. And kindergartners love that.
You're a brave man, giving pins to kindergartners.
Yeah.
I guess I mean, they're. Yeah. I got through it without them choking.
Well, yeah, I'm not worried about choking. I'm worried about it coming out at the other end.
Well, I guess I won't know ever what happened.
I have some pins if you want to try it.
Okay, so are there any questions from? We're at just about time. Are any questions from?
Yeah. I have a question regarding going back to the standards. Basically, the standards, I don't know, in Massachusetts, they are following stringently the standards or not, but in California, they were focused on standards a lot. So how do you account for that? Mm-hmm. You did mention something about that, but because they are very stringent about how much time you spend, and then there's assessment for every activity. There should something come out from it. Yep. I don't know over here. Do you see? Yes.
Jack? Seems like a
really so
public middle school.
Yeah, my science and tech stuff. I have my own set of frameworks through the state of Massachusetts, and it is through they call it engineering frameworks, and it's mostly the design process for 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. Some of it is old machine hand tool stuff, but a lot of it then falls into science class, so physical science, a lot of physical science actually into my class. And so a lot of we do activator questions, do nows, and just trying to get kids to, there is some formal assessment of can you identify specific things, and can you do a little bit of gear ratio math, and then for their summative assessment, it becomes more that major project, right? Can they, as far as mastery goes, when they're building just simple gears the week 1 to their, the automated assembly line week 10, there's a lot that happened between then and now. So can you remember what happened a week ago or 9 weeks ago to this week, and put it all together, but then be able to describe and explain that to me, and can you use the engineering design process throughout that? There's a lot of assessment every day about doing that.
Properly utilized.
Yeah, but I don't know if that answered your question. If somebody's monitoring it, the state is.
Yeah. I am in lower elementary. I am not into that. It's great in physical science, so basically you did answer the question.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.
So you all mentioned how math is integral to Legos, and I was wondering when working with students who maybe not anxious, is there a different way that you approach those audiences when doing projects?
But Dina, that seems like.
Yeah. When I get the kids to join the robotics team, I don't talk about math at all in the beginning. I'm like, what are you building things? Legos, right? Because kids don't, I think, make the connection between Legos and math as obviously. And what I find is a lot of times students will come in and they'll tell me, I tell them I teach math, I do math, and they'll say, I don't like math. And I'm like, oh, that's okay. We'll get you going. I'm not out to make people be mathematicians. I just want them to feel confident. And then after they've been doing a lot of good stuff, I'm like, oh, like you figured that out. That's really good. Like you're pretty good at math. And they'll be like, what? And I'm like, yeah, you guys like figure that out. And I try to like slip it in like really like low key, like, oh, like what a cool physics move you made there. And I'm like, what? And they're like, yeah, the gears, like you figured that out. And like I try to be really sneaky about it because I know there's a phobia around now. So I try to do it more subtly when I'm doing it. So being like, this is math, because then no one would sign up to my team.
God, where were you 50 years ago? Because that's where I got my phobia. So
Have you written? This is your research that you're doing, like, or you mentioned?
I research barriers to STEM completion for
Yeah.
underrepresented groups, but it's
Yeah.
through like in the calculus sequence.
Yeah.
But through that, I've researched a lot of barriers
Yeah.
in K-12. Yeah.
So we could like probably find your research somewhere if we
Yeah.
wanted to.
Yes.
Okay.
Happy to
Do you
share.
want to point us in the right direction?
I think my email is somewhere. If anybody wanted it,
Okay.
send it along.
All right. Okay. Well, I think that
yeah,
run
I got to get
over,
upstairs.
But thank you, everybody.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you all for
panelists.
coming.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah. All right. I guess